restoring Illinois to greatness. This is Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute and hosted by AM 560's Dan Proft.
Welcome back to Illinois Rising. My name's John Tillman. I'm the CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute, and as always the case on this show, these opinions that you're hearing today and other days are my personal opinions, not necessarily those of any organization I represent. Also here with her own very pithy opinions is Kristen McQueary from the Chicago Tribune editorial board. She writes some of the most sparky, interesting editorials, both sometimes with her own signature and sometimes under the editorial rubric itself. Kristen, really interesting times in politics for people who are junkies like you and I are. I think one of the things that's going on in the country, as well as here in Illinois, is this fight between the insiders and the outsiders. In the presidential election, everybody's starting to pay attention, if you're right of center, to the Republican nominees. 4,332 people, I think, are currently running for president, and it's hard to keep track of them all.
Just on the Republican side.
Just on the
right,
Republican
yes.
side, right. And if you add up the polling numbers of all the vote getters who are outsiders, Trump, Fiorina, Carson, Cruz, and Walker to some degree as an outsider governor, it adds up to 63% versus what I'll call the insiders, the South Carolina, I can't remember his name right now, the guy from South Carolina who I'm really not a huge fan of. But anyway, my point is, Governor Rauner was elected as an outsider to, as he said, shake up Springfield against the ultimate insider, Mike Madigan. Do you think there's something going on much broader in culture that is driving this?
I do. I think part of it is that voters are more informed than they've ever been. And I hate to date myself, but when I first started in this business, there was no internet. You were really kind of at the mercy of what was dropped at your doorstep in terms of newspapers and what you were reading and seeing on television. And now that's just entirely different. There are so many varied opinions, and people are much better informed. It's easier to track people's flip-flops. It's easier to track who's funding them, where the money is coming from. And so it has just created an elevated discourse. And I do think, to your point about the outsiders, voters are tired of hearing the same cliches, getting the same, you get to a point where it doesn't really matter who gets elected. If it's a Democrat, it's a Republican, because nobody seems to be able to affect the real change from the inside that this country needs. And so that's why they're gravitating to people like Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think it comes back to, I think part of this is what they feel is that voters feel, everyday people feel, we live a life of accountability. We're accountable to make our mortgage payment. We're accountable to show up for work and perform well, or we lose our job. The bosses will tell us if we're not doing well. We're accountable to raise our children and try to make sure they get off to school and do their homework at night. And yet, on both parties, for a long time now, whether it was when Republicans were in control and they had both chambers and a president, Democrats were in control, had both chambers and a president, both were rejected in succeeding elections. And there's been we're kind of in this churning place. And I think it's all about accountability, that people are very frustrated that the political system seems out of control and loyal to itself rather than the people. And perhaps nothing illustrated that better than the fight we had on this Senate Bill 1229, the arbitration bill we've talked about so much today. Tell us a little bit about what was going on and sort of the crazy shenanigans is the only word I can come up with, which I've used twice today, but it really applies to the craziness, the circus atmosphere, the mystery of what actually happens inside that chamber on a vote like this that is so momentous.
So the interesting thing is when they rang the bell and they came back from caucus last week, I don't think anybody really knew how that vote was going to go down, because sometimes what happens in Springfield is people will keep their vote close to their vest, and then when it goes up on the board, they wait to see how many yeses it has, how many noes, and then they make their decision. So I think that's what everyone was anticipating was going to happen with that. When the debate just kept going on, and they were talking about other pieces of legislation, it became clear that the Democrats were missing some people, and I think there was probably panic going on. They were trying to track down these Democrats. They were trying to figure out if they should call the bill, and it took 2 hours before they eventually did call it. So I do think it was a rare moment of unorganization from the Madigan side.
And when you say they look at the board to see who's voting, what that means is the people who lack courage are waiting to see which way the wind's blowing before they decide how to vote. And she is Kristen McQueary, who's been with us today from the Chicago Tribune editorial page, one of the great writers on politics and public policy in the state. Kristen, it's been delightful doing the show with you today. Thanks so much for being with us, and we look forward to having you back at another time.
Thank you, John.